Hey, this is Nate from NateCollinsPhoto.com. Today I was going to do something a little bit different. I saw someone in one of my social circles was asking a little bit of questions about Lightroom, and if anybody had, any classes, courses, whatever. My 2 cents was, hey, just go play with it. I've been doing this a long, long time. I don't know that I would pass any of the courses that some of my people in my circles teach at this point, and I've been in the Adobe suite since I was a teenager, and that was many, many years ago. So I thought I'd run through my workflow on one quick image and kind of at least give people maybe a little bit of a starting point. I really hate the amount of, I guess gatekeeping would be the word in photography and anything artistic, really. It's the reason that I post all of my camera settings on my blogs as well as on my social media when I do social media. It's just, let's let people feel comfortable. It doesn't need to be, everything's not a competition. Anyway, so I'm going to run through the workflow on an image, and I've already worked this image for myself, but I like the image, and yeah, so this was actually a pretty incredible day. We came across 869986. We came across whales that were sprinting for about 45 minutes, about 10 miles. It was pretty incredible. And it was in the sun, which was kind of rare lately around here. So here it is. They were actually porpoising. They were going so fast, throwing huge spray. You can check out my my blogs later this week. They'll have more details on them. But for now, here's a workflow run through. It's going to go through a little bit of what I would do in Lightroom, and then how I pop it over into Photoshop to do a couple other odds and ends. And you might have a better way, but maybe this gives you something to go with. Also, people who learn by just playing with it, you're going to know way more ways to fix it. When I worked in the sign business, a lot of the guys who had the technical degrees, if something went wrong, they couldn't really correct it or work around it. Versus if you had, gone out and learned yourself, like, okay, well, there's 3 ways to do this that I know of, and I can figure this out. So anyhow, on to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to, just out of OCD probably or whatever, I'm going to get the horizon straight. There's actually, I was showing my wife and my kid, we're at a doctor's office the other day, and there was an ocean shot that didn't have the horizon straight. It was just, I couldn't I was having a hard time even dealing with it. You can also break this down into like rules of thirds and stuff. I generally try to leave the image a little bit larger through Lightroom than I might need downstream. So if I want to crop it later, I've got more to crop through. But if I know I know I'm going to have a level image, so I might as well start with it level. And this is about all I would ever really want, so go through from there. The steps that I use, and again, everybody's got different programs. One trick that you could do if you're brand new is you can click auto and then back down, and you can see what it's trying to do. To me, it's trying to do insane things here in auto. I don't know what its goal is, so I generally don't use auto, but it's a decent place to get a first idea. So you can go back and reset it. Reset my highly technical crop. So there we go. So generally, I'm trying to make the subject kind of about what I would expect or what I would want. And I find the less you move most of these sliders, the better. That said, highlights and whites, you can often manipulate pretty far off that 0 center line and you still have pretty good results. And it also depends on what your end goal is. For me, I'm trying to keep the photo as close to what I saw, but maybe highlight a few things that, just to add a little bit of depth so that you'd want to stare at it a little longer. But, you can go through the light here. This is the first thing that I start to play with and try to get just kind of a balance, not necessarily, you know, fine-tuned, but just sort of a balance. And then I tend to go to color grading. And again, I'm just sort of looking for a balance of what I expect I'm going to want downstream. Try not to do anything too extreme is always, you know, these ones you can tend to push pretty far off the zero axis too. And again, really just do what you want to do. Then I scroll down to effects and I might add a little bit of texture and a little bit of clarity. This one gets, if you push this too far, it really adds a lot of contrast, does some different stuff, but also when you zoom in, it kind of, I don't know, I don't generally push much past, you know, 20 on either of these, depending on what I'm trying to do. Dehaze, sometimes useful, sometimes not. This day was pretty clear. I often add a little bit of vignette, just to give it, try to focus you subconsciously into the center. And then the manual noise reduction is something that I will definitely look at. This shot's pretty clean on the subject, but if you up the luminance, you can see that I'm taking out some of the pixelization here. The downside is I'm going to lose a little bit of the detail, but on something where the subject's big across the screen, that's less of a worry. If it was tiny on the screen, you might start to lose details that you're looking to keep. But again, it really, just play with it, get out there and use it. So now I've gone through the manual noise reduction, I've gone through the effects, I've gone through color grading, and I've gone through light. This is when I step into the color game, and I'm looking for that balance, and then I want to fine-tune the color. And the color really, I don't bump off temperature very far. Vibrance and saturation I might play with a little bit, and then the individual colors, same kind of concept, but you don't often need to do, I find I might highlight one color, you know, if a bird has a yellow or red eye, I might bump that up. In this case, there's a lot of blues. I don't know that I want to play with that too much, but for instance, if I turn the saturation way up or way down, you know, luminance, same thing. I might add a little bit there. That's not bad, is it? All right, so I kind of have the color game, and that's pretty close. If you go too far, the other game that you're gonna have to play is, you know, where it's going to be displayed, like how color correct are your monitors. You know, for me, they'll be color correct for my monitors and for my printer, but then I might, if I'm sending them around to people, I might still bump them in on my iPhone, just hit auto or whatever, and that sometimes gives you a little bit more. So from here, I've kind of got the colors that I like for this project. I'm going to go to masking. And really, I rarely use subject. Occasionally I will, but not that often. Use linear gradient quite a bit. And that creates, you can add some blacks, and it's going to kind of force your eye into the subject area. Yeah, obviously you can control a lot of different things here too, but this gives you a basic idea. And I might do it from the top too, to kind of force your eye down off of the big field up there. And again, this is all to taste, so don't let somebody tell you, like, I've been doing this a long time. I've been between marketing and doing videos and writing technical stuff and blah blah blah, but the base of a lot of it has been the photography. I get people who still tell me to this day that, like, you know, they'll ask me questions and I'll kind of give them what I do, and like, oh, that doesn't work. I don't even argue with people anymore. It's just, okay, you know, whatever. I've got a lifetime of things that say it does work, but as long as you're getting what you want to get, That's really kind of the point of this all. So you see me here using the brush. I like to do this to splashes, and this will be my one specific trick for you. And then I ramp down the highlights. Typically the whites stay pretty close, maybe a little bit. I increase the shadow depth, up the contrast, and then I'll add some clarity, maybe a little texture, and maybe a little bit of dehaze. And again, I'm not really trying to change what this is so much as just give it a little bit of a boost. Same thing, I'll maybe add another brush, maybe give it a little bit more. Maybe I'll highlight the blue whale's rostrum and bump the exposure up just a little bit. Maybe bump the contrast up just a little bit too. Another thing that I found, especially on water photos, is if I add a little bit of black to the behind on the horizon, kind of mimics what you do see when you're out there. And then in this case, it really does bring your eye more into where that rostrum is and that subject. Another one that you could do, this one's you do it maybe real thin, but you can add some shadows. And again, like, all depends on what you're looking for. You've got people who will argue all sides of every which way. I don't really, if you're happy with what you're doing, you're happy with what you're doing. But I might add just a little bit of black here, and you can see it just sort of gives it a little bit more texture or depth there. Anyway, so without making this a 4-hour long video, yeah, that kind of gets me where I wanted to be. So I'm going to export it. And we'll just export it into this folder for now. So yeah, we've got that versus if we go back and we reset it all. It just really kind of depends on what you're looking for. So I tend to like the second one a little bit more. It takes a little bit of maybe the Crayola blue out of the situation. But once I've got that spit out, the next part of my workflow personally is I'm going to jump into Photoshop with it, and I'm going to take a look at a couple different things. One, I'm going to resize it before I send it to anybody because I don't want to send them giant files. But the other thing you can do in Photoshop is you can try the auto tone. I don't like what it did there. You can try auto color. So sometimes I don't like what it did there either. I like what I did better. But sometimes you'll get a balance that looks nice, but the colors aren't quite there. And believe it or not, the quick little image auto tone, auto color, sometimes will dial in that image. This one didn't really need it, but the other thing that I do, you can do this in Lightroom. I don't personally believe that the learning system stuff is there yet, so I like to do it myself. But the clone stamp, my lens had gotten splattered. All these photos were taken. The boat we were doing like 15 miles an hour trying to keep up with these blue whales. So I use the clone tool to get rid of any stuff that might be sitting on my lens, or if there's something that I kind of don't want in the image. So, this sort of stuff. And you just kind of find light that's real close. And again, a lot of people do this in Lightroom. I don't feel like it works as well as doing it manually. I'm old. I've been doing this a long time. Maybe I'm jaded. Maybe I'm wrong. You do what you want to do. But this is how I do it. And I just kind of scroll through. That looks like what I'm thinking I want. Maybe a little bit more up here. You can see, like, here I chose a spot that's too white so you can see that circle. So now I'm going to undo that. And here's the part where you got to decide when is enough enough. Maybe there's enough going on in this photo that I don't need to. You know, that's good. Save it. Then I'll resize it to whatever I want. Send it to friends and family. But that's kind of my workflow. Hopefully that gives you a place to start. Maybe you learned a trick or two. And yeah, there's a reason that I'm a big believer in get out and use it, work through it, learn what you need to learn. And you're going to have an incredible in-depth knowledge of what works for you, versus if you try to take a course and are like book oriented on just A to B to C lesson, and you don't get what works for you. So hopefully this helps somebody. And yeah, you know, check out my blogs. My blogs have all of the photo settings. I don't really do very much stuff about what I'm doing afterwards, but this is a pretty good run through on that. But yeah, go out and take pictures, man. Don't let people gatekeep this art from you.